Kursk, of course. No sudden or swift changes yet. Russia withdraws its troops, however, from Korenevsky district of the Kursk region. Well, it's forced, because we supposedly destroyed all three supply bridges that were used by the Russian military to receive equipment and reinforcements. I say supposedly, why is that? What do I mean? One of these bridges was blasted by missiles of the armed forces of Ukraine during the afternoon of August 16th. The second was also destroyed shortly after. And just yesterday news came that a third bridge is down. But this can be, and highly likely it is, Russian propaganda working, as no reliable source at the moment offers us air or ground photo nor video confirmation exists. So, while we are checking on that by looking for multiple reliable sources to get you a true update on the Kursk situation, UATV English talks to someone who knows a lot about what Russian propaganda actually is and how to counter it. Interview on UATV English. We have a very special, as usual, guest, Andre KES, Ukrainian veteran, co-founder of the Propaganda Study Institute, whatever that means. Hello, Andre.
Oh, hello.
Right, well, just talk me and my audience through Propaganda Study Institute. What do you guys do?
We are studying the mechanisms of Russian propaganda, how it's made, how it's planned, how it's implemented in the media, in the social media, how to expose it and how to fight it, because it's something really, really important nowadays, not only in Ukraine. In Ukraine, we had that problem since 2008 at least, even earlier, but also in Europe, in the European countries, where informational warfare is waged by Russia for almost a decade as of today.
Right, so ever since, have you found out any proper ways to counter Russian propaganda? Do you know the ways?
Two best ways to counter Russian propaganda is, first, we have to expose it. It's probably one of the most effective ways, because it's really easy, of course, to close all kinds of pro-Russian channels, so they don't have any tools to retransmit their propaganda and deliver it to the masses. But at the same time, we live in the free society with freedom of speech, where it's only up to you whether you trust information or not. So we have to do whatever we can to expose Russian propaganda. I believe that it's probably the best way. So we have to show people how it works and what it does to democracies.
If the best way is to expose rather than just, cut off the wire, how would you command that Ukrainian parliament just recently, just today, if I'm not mistaken, cut off the FSB channel? Is that right? It's called FSB Channel or whatever it is.
You mean the Russian church?
The Russian church, yeah, the Russian church. Was it a channel of the? Was it TV channel or was it a Telegram channel?
It was an organization that was created in 1943 by Stalin himself. We made a small research on this, and I believe that our viewers can find it on a YouTube. So it was an organization created in 1943 after years of eliminating religious organizations in the Soviet Union, in Ukraine specifically, killing thousands and hundreds of thousands of people and priests and clerics. In 1943, Stalin decided to to restore Russian Church, the Orthodox Church in the Soviet Union, because people back then, they didn't want to die for the ambitions of communists, for ambitions of the Red Terror. That's why they needed something, some kind of force to be motivated, to be inspired. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't know that 100% of people that were involved in restoration of this church, they were basically ЧК and KVD and later KGB officers.
Right. So well, that's what I meant. I mean, sometimes it is necessary to cut the wire, to close the channel, just to make these people finally be silent than exposing all the unspeakable atrocities of what they do, what they did, and what they are trying to do now again in Ukraine. So sometimes it's the only way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really good decision, not only because it's a matter of security, but also it's a great, I would say, great example because this is something that was conducted by the government.
Right.
Governments are currently, they have a lot of dilemmas, a lot of problems fighting Russian propaganda that is directed at society. And the problem is Russians use democracy in order to destroy democracy within their informational warfare. That's why whenever governments consider cutting a wire, they are really, really careful because they don't want to violate freedoms, freedom of speech, for example,
Well, exactly.
freedom of religion. And that is a problem. But the biggest problem is that currently informational, I would say, countering informational warfare
Right.
at this very point is primarily done by volunteers, by non-government organizations, which is wrong because Russian propaganda is conducted, is created, and is pushed by the Russian state.
Indeed, but well, okay. If let's make a step off that governmental thing, like cameraman Starsky. Is that your channel, isn't it?
Operator Starsky.
Operator Starsky. Okay, Operator Starsky. Forgive me. So, any successful stories of countering Russia propaganda by Operator Starsky, just like that for any. Well, I mean, you exposed Russian propaganda. Can you give us a story of that?
Absolutely. I've been exposing Russian propaganda regarding all those myths that were created since 2014. 8 years of bombing Donbass, Nazi in Ukraine, evil Azov killing Russians in Donbass, which provoked Russia to invade Ukraine and things like that, even though Azov was basically created month after beginning of the Russian invasion. And all those myths that were produced by the Russian propagandists and broadly used nowadays. Still, there's a lot of retransmitters of this of this propaganda in Ukraine and on the West. So I'm basically teaching people, arming them with facts, because this is something very important. You cannot train a person to do fact checking, to fight Russian propaganda, to become someone who combats Russian propaganda professionally. You cannot do that on a YouTube. But what you can do is arm people with facts and knowledge, and this is what we're doing right now.
But Alexei, I'm going to ask you a question that I consider. I'm very, very interested. How do you, how a person can believe sometimes in absolute, unbelievable lies by Russia? I mean, even if this is a domestic audience, like I don't know, fighter geese, Ukrainian fighter geese, like the geese that are flying whatever faster than a fighter jet, whatever, or the mosquitoes. The killing mosquitoes. What are they? Who is creating that? And is that for them only solely for domestic audience? Because I don't think the Westerns would ever believe in this.
The problem is there's not only two audiences, domestic and external audience. There are different target audiences that are used in different informational operations. So me and you, we would never believe in combat geese, genetically modified ducks, and things like that, American biolabs. But Unfortunately, or fortunately, we are not their target audience because we're not susceptible to Russian disinformation.
Right.
Russia targets specific target audiences that are more susceptible, people who like conspiracies, people who are more susceptible to facts that
Right.
must be checked. They don't check information. So there are specific target audiences, and unfortunately, the audience of people who don't check information is pretty huge, because this is our nature. We don't usually check information because we are informational consumers. We're not fact checkers, and I'm not blaming anybody for not checking information because it's natural. This is what we do.
So if I would like to become a fact checker, you're actually saying that this is something unnatural. How do I do this? How do I teach myself for fact checking? Like like pick up 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 sources, and what I do then, I just compare the information.
You can pick at least three sources of
Right.
information, at least. One thing you should also remember is um, Russia is not a reliable source. They, of course, we can be called biased, all right, but at the same time, Russia is not a country where people have freedom of speech. Russia is not a country that has independent media. Russia is not a country uh, where independent journalists can operate freely without risking of dying, right? So why then considering Russian sources of information as reliable sources? That is something that everybody should ask themselves. Sometimes they provide information that can be trusted, but in most cases, everything you can hear coming from Russian news channels, state media,
Right.
mainstream media, so called, that is basically whatever correlates with Russian agenda, with Kremlin's agenda. So that is a really, really biased information. Um, First thing you gotta do is when you hear some kind of insane sensation, some kind of hype-ish information, you need to check the source of this information. Is it
Right.
true? Because anybody can write anything nowadays in the social media, and Russians do this all the time. They post fake news from big resources like Politico, for example.
Right.
It's a very well-known journal, but magazine. But recently, they published already several publications regarding Ukraine being abandoned by our allies and things like that, which never existed. So they literally photoshopped the cover and they posted this all over the media.
Absolutely.
But this publication never existed on Politico, for example. And same with other sources of information, the same with other media. So you gotta be really careful if you see some kind of
Hi, Bish. Right.
message in the social media. You have to go to the real resource and check if it's there. And also you should check the initial source of this information, because Russians, they like to do it this way. They create an article with the source somewhere in, let's say, Bangladesh. So like local Bangladeshi newspaper
Publication. Right.
that never existed, and then using this as a reliable source of information, they deliver it to the Western media. So that is something that we should always remember. We gotta check the sources, the
Right.
initial
Right.
sources of information.
But this is again about the you like operator Starsky exposes Russian lies and propaganda. But what about being proactive? What about creating the events that actually would make our enemy to try to expose our truth or the way we deliver it? Is that a way, or it's better just to close or to expose? Are only two options of it.
So the main difference between us and them is that Russians are massively using propaganda and disinformation, but we cannot fight propaganda with propaganda. We have to fight Russian propaganda with proper communications, with public relations, and we have to be as much transparable as we can be. Um, I believe that this is the only proper way, because if you spread propaganda eventually you will lose all kind of trust from the society.
Right. Well, sorry, I was pushing you to that answer. I absolutely agree with you, Alexei. And I thank you so very much for your time, for your experience, and for the great job that you do, that you are fighting lies with truth and not more lies. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye. Again, it was Andre KES, Ukrainian veteran, co-founder of the Operator Starsky YouTube channel, who is fighting Russian lies with truth and not more lies. UATV is going to give you more news. Stay tuned.